My name is Margaret Lewis, and for 40 years I thought I had the perfect marriage. We lived in Portland, Oregon, in a small white house with a garden full of roses that my husband, Robert, planted every spring. People in our neighborhood called us the forever couple. They saw our morning walks, our shared coffee, and the way he always opened the door for me. But what no one saw was how quiet our evenings had become. How we sat across from each other at dinner, speaking less and less as the years went by. How the laughter that once filled our home had slowly faded into routine silence. One afternoon, when the rain was tapping softly on the windows, Robert came into the kitchen. He didn't sit down, he just stood there, his face tired and strange. "Margaret," he said, "I think I need to start over. I'm leaving." At first, I thought he was joking. "Leaving? For where?" "You mean a trip?" He shook his head. "No. For good." The plate slipped from my hand and broke on the floor. The sound of shattering porcelain was the sound of my world collapsing. I didn't beg him to stay. I couldn't. I just watched him pack his suitcase, watched the man who had shared my youth, my children, my dreams, walk away without looking back. For weeks after he left, the house felt like a ghost. Every room carried a memory, every chair a silence that screamed. I would wake up at 5 a.m., expecting the smell of his coffee, and then remember that he wasn't there. I spent the first month crying. The second month in disbelief. By the third, I realized something I never thought I would: I was still alive. One morning, I stood in front of the mirror and whispered, "You're still here, Margaret." My hair was grayer, my eyes softer, but I saw someone strong staring back. I started walking every morning again, alone this time. At first, it felt empty, but slowly the silence began to comfort me. I noticed the trees, the laughter of children waiting for their school bus, the smell of fresh rain. I had spent 40 years being part of someone else's story. Now, for the first time, I was learning to write my own. I joined a small art class at the community center. I hadn't painted since college, but something in me wanted color again. On my first day, I met Daniel, the class instructor. He was gentle, maybe in his early 60s, with kind eyes and a quiet smile that felt safe. "Don't worry about getting it right," he said when I hesitated to touch the canvas. "Just paint what you feel." And I did. I painted a broken teacup, then a garden in spring, then a woman standing by the sea. Each painting felt like a piece of my heart being stitched back together. Daniel noticed. "You paint sadness beautifully," he said one evening. I laughed softly. "I've had practice." Over time, our conversations grew longer. We talked about books, travel, and the way time changes people. He had lost his wife 5 years earlier to cancer. There was pain in his story too, but also peace, the kind that only comes after learning to live with loss. One day after class, he said, "Would you like to grab coffee?" It had been decades since someone asked me that without obligation. I hesitated, then smiled. "I'd like that." We went to a small cafe by the river. The coffee was strong, the air smelled of rain, and the world suddenly felt new again. He didn't flirt or try to fill the silence. We just talked, two people who had been broken, learning to be whole again. Over the next months, Daniel became my closest friend. We took walks, visited art galleries, and sometimes sat for hours without speaking. One evening, we watched the sunset over the Columbia River. The sky was a painting of gold and pink, and he said quietly, "It's strange, isn't it? How endings can look so beautiful." That night, I went home and finally opened the box of photographs I had avoided since Robert left. Our wedding pictures, birthdays, holidays, all moments frozen in time. I didn't cry this time. Instead, I whispered, "Thank you, for what was." And then I closed the box. I realized forgiveness isn't about excusing what happened. It's about freeing yourself from what keeps you trapped. 6 months later, I sold the big white house. My children were surprised, but I told them I wanted something smaller, closer to the ocean. I moved to Cannon Beach, where I rented a cozy cottage with a porch facing the sea. Daniel helped me paint the walls sky blue. We spent that summer painting together, drinking lemonade, and watching the waves roll in. Sometimes he'd play soft jazz while I painted. Sometimes, he'd read aloud from poetry books. One evening, He brought me a small bouquet of white daisies, my favorite. I know we've both lost a lot, he said, but maybe life's giving us another chance to love, in a different way. My eyes filled with tears. I don't know if I can fall in love again, Daniel. He smiled gently. Then don't. Just let love find you when it's ready. Time passed quietly, beautifully. There was no grand romance, no fireworks, just warmth, kindness, and peace. I realized that love after loss doesn't have to be wild. Sometimes, it's simply being seen and understood. On my 61st birthday, Daniel surprised me with a painting. It was of a woman standing at the edge of the sea, holding a single daisy. At the bottom, he had written, "She didn't let it break her." That night, I finally cried, not from sadness, but from gratitude. Because I understood that love isn't always forever in one form. Sometimes it changes shape, softens, and returns when you least expect it. Years later, as I sit on my porch watching the ocean, I still think of Robert sometimes, but without pain. He was a chapter of my life, not the whole book. And now, when people ask if I ever fell in love again, I smile and say, yes, with life itself. Moral. No matter how late in life it happens, heartbreak is not the end. Sometimes, it's the beginning of rediscovering who you truly are, and learning that love can return, in gentler, truer forms.